Barbie.
You set the feminist movement back 50 years. You destroy girls' innate sense of worth, and you are killing the planet with your glorification of rampant consumerism.
What's up, guys? It's Oakley, also known as Whoa Lad, and today I decided finally, I don't know, I should make a video about the Barbie movie because I watched it the other day, and honestly, I thought it was pretty great. So, where should we even get started on this?
She's not dead, she's just having an existential crisis.
Okay, come on. Hey, what's wrong?
The Barbie movie is a meta-commentary. It's talking about the society that we live in while existing in the society that we live in. That might sound a bit confusing, but let me explain. I've talked to a few people about what they thought about the movie, and everybody has different things to say. Some people don't understand what it was trying to convey. Other people see what they were trying to do, but think that they didn't do it right. And honestly, I'll just tell you guys straight up from the beginning of this freaking video that I think that the Barbie movie did a pretty good job at what it was trying to convey. So what even was the movie talking about, right? Well, the movie was talking about the patriarchy while living underneath the patriarchy. So to those people who think that it didn't do a good job, my question to you guys is kind of making a movie about the patriarchy while living underneath the patriarchy is like trying to answer a question that you're not done asking yet. So really, I feel like the movie did a good job. So the movie starts off, she's normal Barbie, and then she has this problem and she goes seeking for answers. She ends up finding out through the weird Barbie that gets played with too much that she has to go find the person playing with her, who is the person that's basically controlling Barbie's life and her thoughts and feelings. So I mean, the way that you look at that, I feel like just in and of itself in that way, it's kind of like the subconscious, right? If we're Barbie, who's playing with Barbie is like, I don't want to say like, you know, like a higher being or something like that, because I don't think that that's what it is. I think that it's more like a subconscious thing. She's like, oh, I have like this problem, but I don't know what's going on. So she leaves everything that she knows to go and try to find the answer to why she's so sad and why like her feet are flat. It's a bit silly. She leaves everything that she knows behind, goes into the unknown in search of an answer to her problem. Basically, like, why is she just so sad? Ken goes along with her, which is like whatever. I think that it also helps because she goes from the Barbie world into the real world, and having Ken there, a man, you can't talk about the patriarchy without talking about men. In order to deal with the patriarchy, you also have to deal with the men involved. Before I continue with this, I want to say that before I watched this movie, I read the SCUM Manifesto. And so yeah, like I read that and then I watched the movie a few days later after finishing the book. It was very interesting because I feel like if I did not read that book, I really wouldn't have walked into that movie and thought all of the things that I thought and tied together so many different things like I did. So I'm really grateful that I was able to have that experience and be able to educate myself before going into this movie and being thrown into basically, I would say, a soft, radical feminist movie. And by soft, I mean it was pretty lighthearted if we're comparing it to the SCUM Manifesto. So at the beginning of the movie, we see Barbie and Ken together and they're going on trips, but I'm pretty sure it was when they were riding through basically like the travel space in order to get to the real world. Anyways, we see Barbie and Ken together, and Ken is a background character. And the reason that is because, well, who is playing with Barbie? A little girl is playing with Barbie. At the beginning of the movie, the unaffected, basically like unaltered Barbie world, Kens are feminine, they're flamboyant, they're just like these feminine men. The reason for that is because they're not existing within the patriarchy yet. And of course that can be debated because, well, from a very young age we're brought into the society that we live in, so as little as girls are, as young as they are, whatever, they're still being influenced by the patriarchy. And yes, that is definitely accurate and that is very real, but throughout most of our childhoods, it takes a long time before we get to the point where everything that society is throwing at us, it takes a while before it actually is engraved in our minds and we accept it and we stop fighting back to that. We see Ken's before everything happens as being basically just these feminine guys taking caregiving roles within these relationships with these women. And I mean, it also could be debated, like, you're also expected from a young age that you can't really be friends with boys. You have to just be in a relationship with them if you want to just like enjoy their company or something. So I guess that is also a bit part of the conversation. It's more about childhood innocence at the beginning, how you're innocent before you are subjected to the confines of our society. The Kens are played in ways that girls perceive boys as children, and also the way that boys act as children, because not every boy at freaking 2 years old is thrown into this ideology where you have to be a man, you know, you're allowed to be a child. And it's as if the only freedom that we really get in this patriarchal society, this capitalistic society, it's almost as if the only freedom that we will ever fully be accepted to experience is as children. So this is where that whole innocence comes in. This is how boys and girls in this Barbie world are living in harmony, essentially, right? So we're also looking at this movie through a pretty binary perspective. We're not really introduced to any trans people because that would be a bit too much for already what the movie is having to say. I'm definitely not saying that I wouldn't have wanted to see more queer people in the movie, but I didn't expect it and it didn't really happen. Let's talk about the SCUM Manifesto for a second, just real quick. So that is the book that I read before I watched this movie, so I had these ideas in my mind. And I'm not saying that I agree with them, I'm just saying that I read them and I think it was a very interesting point, especially because it was written like in the 60s, 70s era. In the SCUM Manifesto, basically, it is a very radical book. So what I'm not saying that I agree with it. She says that men can't love. They're like machines, they're half humans, and basically they just wish that they could be women. Wanting to be female, they surround themselves with females and, you know, gain control over them because that's kind of, they're raised to believe that that is their right. And they basically feel all of their love through them. I agree more with the last part. I think it can be very true in our society, and I feel like it is definitely shown in the Barbie movie that after being introduced to the patriarchy, and the patriarchy basically comes over into the Barbie world because of Ken, being innocent, naive, whatever you want to call it. He brings it in, and then all of the guys basically just take power, even though they don't really know what they're doing, and they have no experience, and they just are running on like this power trip. So we basically see that Ken is very reliant on Barbie. It's almost like it's playing on like this sort of idea that a lot of women are expected to be reliant on their men or their man, and basically like Ken doing this is, for one, it's a feminine trait. He's a very feminine guy in this movie, and what I like is it's not portrayed as being bad, and he's not being portrayed as being lesser than for being a feminine guy. It is pretty much only when he becomes this more stereotypically in our society masculine man, taking this more masculine role. What are you doing, bro? Only really when he takes this more masculine role is when everything just kind of falls out of place and it's just everywhere.
I'm not the president. No one on the Supreme Court is me. I'm not good enough for anything.
The movie pretty quickly jumps into the problems that a lot of women face within the patriarchy when men have power over women in micro levels and in macro levels. They show up in the real world and they are rollerblading around, having a good time. And Ken is feeling super pumped, he's feeling good, he's feeling admired, while Barbie at first is feeling similar to that, and then quickly realizes that she's starting to feel this energy coming off of a lot of people that is more malicious and more violent. Like, well, why do men see women as something to take, as something to overcome, not overcome, but just something to overpower, to exert like their power over? And it's because we live in a patriarchy, and men are told that they are better than women from an earlier age. And I also want to put it in there, if you haven't watched any of my other videos before, I am a queer person. I did not grow up as a boy, so I feel like my perspective when it comes to things like this is a lot different than some other people. Another reason why I think this movie is so awesome is because of the broad audience that it is bringing into the theaters, that it's bringing into just at home to watch this movie, to see it with their families, to see it with whoever. It's playing on nostalgia, and because it's playing on nostalgia, and because also it's a feminist movie, we have a lot of different people who are watching this movie who are thinking all different types of things, who come from different life experiences. We have some boys watching it, we have some guys watching it, a lot of them are girls. A lot of them are girls and women watching this movie. And honestly, the feminist movement could be stronger. So I feel like this is a good point. I feel like this is a good movie, and it's portraying what it needs to portray given the limits that it's within.
You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane, but if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women, because you're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood.
Barbie feels threatened while they're rollerblading. Ken feels admired.
Why are these men looking at me?
Yeah, they're also staring at me.
I don't know the word for it, but I'm conscious, but it's myself that I'm conscious of.
I'm not getting any of that. I feel what can only be described as admired, but not ogled. And there's no undertone of violence.
Mine very much has an undertone of violence.
And that just goes to show the dynamics that we have and just the varying experiences from just being perceived as a woman to being perceived as a man in our society, and how you can go from feeling empowered and safe as a man to feeling unsafe and threatened as a woman. We meet, I think he's the CEO of like the Barbie Corporation. We see that this guy, he doesn't want to relinquish his power. In fact, he wants to just hold on to it. I mean, why would he want to share his power or in control that he has to somebody else? He doesn't even want to give it to other men. Why would he want to give it to a woman? Especially if he's raised within the patriarchy to believe that he is better than her. Stuff like this really just inflates the male ego. He's a man-child. We can see that through the whole movie, that he basically functions with the only really needs and desires of somebody who wants to keep his power. A lot of businesses, a lot of companies, they don't care about you. They don't care about the rights of people. They don't care about human rights. They're just looking to make money. They're not looking to help spread awareness. They're not looking to help support a cause. They're just looking for what's popular and what will make them money. And honestly, it's really sad and it's pretty evil in my opinion, because there are so many people who have so much money and have so much power and decide to do absolutely nothing with it. Because I feel like if just the right people had all the money in the world, there would be, well, no one would be going hungry. No one would be living on the streets. No one would be struggling alone with their depression and their mental illnesses. The world would just be a better place. Let's talk about messed up Barbie. I want to talk about that. Messed up Barbie is the Barbie who got played with too much, has crazy hair, has crazy makeup, does the splits, and basically there's this scene where she says you're either brainwashed or you're weird. And when I heard that, I felt like I just felt hurt, honestly, because this is a metaphor for basically, it's just so many different things, so it's hard to just pinpoint one of them. But just that phrase is just a metaphor for how we live through our society. And everybody has different levels of knowledge when it comes to just what culture is, what society is. So many people live their lives never really thinking about their place in society because we're so focused on ourselves individually that for a lot of us, it's hard to look beyond us to see where we fit in the system, to see how we're benefited, to see our privilege, to see where we lack privilege, to see the confines of how we feel our emotions in society, how we judge ourselves in our society, how we are raised in our society. So many different things. I mean, I could talk about that all day, really just look into but you're either brainwashed or you're weird. And that basically goes to show that a lot of people lack the knowledge to even question their reality because they're so brainwashed by it, because their attention is so focused on so many different things that they don't even think that they can think about these things because they've never thought about it before. This is how we live under capitalism, how we live under cis-normativity, how we live within the patriarchy, how we live in heteronormativity, how we live in basically a society that limits all of us. That basically says, if you do this one thing, you're weird. That's basically what it says, and that's what she's saying. She's saying you either don't know what it is that you're doing because you're just doing what other people are doing, or you're weird because you're doing your own thing and you're living your own authentic life. And I think that's very powerful.
Maybe it's time to discover who Ken is.
Okay, I think I get it.
When the Barbies are trying to take back over like the patriarchy and basically just get rid of it in Barbie world, it sounds so funny. But basically they start making the men turn on each other, and they also group together in sisterhood. They find sisterhood together, and they start taking women out of these situations with men, and they try to educate them and just like unbrainwash them and just have them think for themselves. And like, you know, because a lot of people who don't have good friendships, who don't have good relationships, they will end up in pretty terrible romantic relationships with people that they don't even really know if they like, because they don't really even know anything about themselves, because just their whole lives they're kind of fed this narrative that they feed into. Let's go on to talking about when they make the men turn onto each other. So that is a bit questionable. But if we go back to how I said I read the SCUM Manifesto, it's essentially following about like the same thing to a very less radical degree. So basically, they just kind of start messing with the guys. They talk to a lot of guys and just have these guys build up this jealousy towards, they build up this jealousy in themselves that's rooted in insecurity. And I don't think it's necessarily the best thing to do, but I also have had my own experiences, so that's a bigger reason for me. But basically, they just turn the guys onto each other, and on a micro level, I feel like this feeds into the patriarchy in a way, because it's not community focused. You're just kind of focused on like messing with individual men who are their own individuals and probably have a lot of things that they struggle with themselves. So necessarily, I mean, to overcome the patriarchy, I don't think that like making men more toxic is good. It's really not good. I think that it's a bit iffy. But anyways, let's move on from that. So in the patriarchy, everybody struggles. And there's different types of struggles. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying that men are the victims of the patriarchy. They are absolutely not. They are the ones that are on the top, of course. So let's look at the micro levels to which men and women struggle within the patriarchy. And when I say the patriarchy, I'm also mainly talking about the society that we live in. We live in a patriarchy. We live under capitalism. And a lot of those things tie together. I think it ties together really well, actually. So let's just continue. Individually, most men are depressed or insecure, childish, and essentially in a lot of ways, a lot of men are incapable of experiencing love without receiving it through a woman. And I am referencing the idea from the SCUM Manifesto when I say that. If we talk about this daddy-daughter, mother, dynamic that Valerie talks about in the SCUM Manifesto, it's essentially a girl is raised under her mother to take care of men, to agree with her father, to become agreeable, to do things that her father would approve of, to basically seek this male validation from a young age. Growing up, she still thinks that way. So she goes from being a daughter under this mother who is doing the same thing that she is teaching her daughter to do. So it might sound a bit confusing, but honestly, I just think of it as like a loop where you have nobody breaking this chain of thought to think for themselves and to be like, I'm not going to fight for anybody's validation when I could just find it within myself, and I'm gonna get to that part in a second. So We have men who are basically capable of feeling love without receiving it through women. We talk about that on a micro level because a lot of men growing up are basically told to repress their emotions, and basically that women are the emotional ones. So when you're in a relationship with a woman, you know, this is somebody that you can be emotional with. If even then you can let yourself be emotional. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of toxic masculinity underneath the patriarchy that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about, because a lot of people are focused on talking about all of the pros that come to guys being underneath the patriarchy or being within the patriarchy, because they are the patriarchy. So let me just say that.
Oh, look, a construction site. We need that good feminine energy.